Hello and live from the infamous Murph's Pub, I'm Jeremy Taylor and welcome to this week's Wednesday Night Undressed, the podcast that reaches into the wobbly places other podcasts dare adventure. We don't claim to look at things scientifically, but we definitely have all the answers to your mysteries, vegetable, animal and mineral. We know the kings and queens of England and Bulgaria, and questions most political. In short, we can explain matters mathematical, physical and medical. We are the only naked podcast you can undress to on a Wednesday whilst wallowing in your bath. Yes. Let me introduce tonight's panel. We've got Bobby, Julian, Cassidy,
Hi.
Fernando, Ivo,
Hello.
Lewis, Andrei, Alex,
Hi.
and Eli. And Kathleen.
Thank you.
So, Ivo, did you notice we are no longer wallowing in our lugos? Because I never figured out what the hell that was.
Pin back
Well,
your
it
luggles.
used to be pin back your lugos.
Pin back your lugos. Gotcha.
Back your ears.
They're
Lug-oles.
just random words.
This is just bullshit. that
Lughole.
He's making up because he's British, right?
Lugo, no. Lugo, pin back your lugos. Right, yes. We do have sponsors tonight. Susan's been working hard on that, which is very nice. And so we're going to want to thank them. I want to say hello to all our Bulgarian listeners.
Listener.
No, there's more. Radina and her sister. And then there's your parents. And then there's all the people
You
who...
subject your parents to this?
Never. My parents have no idea this podcast exists.
Oh my God.
And then there's all the Ukrainians who've moved down to Bulgaria.
Yeah.
So really, so first question, actually, is quite a difficult question. See how many people mess this up. Don't just jump into the first answer that comes to your mind. It's a very simple question. Is water wet? Is water wet? And since Bobby is playing with himself, let's find out what he thinks. Bobby, is water wet?
Water is not wet. It is the objects in which the hydrogen and oxygen molecules land on.
Oh,
Is
very
wet.
clever. Is that it?
Wrong.
Very wrong.
Water
Okay,
is-
go for it, Lewis.
Water is definitionally wet. So, anything like... it depends on how you define wet. If you define wet as something having water touch its surface, then water has to be wet. Water's touching the other water molecules. So their surface is being touched by a liquid. They're wet. And it doesn't matter if you're touching... Jeremy's doing something. I don't know. He's like freaking me out with his points.
I'm
and
being
such.
wet.
Okay, I have a question
So,
about that then.
Go for it.
If water is by definition wet, what about ice?
Ice is also wet.
Even if it's dry ice?
Dry
I mean,
ice.
not dry ice. Not that's technically not water.
Yeah.
I mean ice that
you.
is so solidly frozen it does not
Melt.
make your fingers wet when you pick it up.
If there's a liquid form of ice that is touching the ice, then the ice is wet. If there is no liquid touching the ice, then the ice is dry.
Okay.
Now, can I just ask the rest of the team here that Mr. Lewis, of course, as we all know, is a lawyer, esteemed lawyer, and he is saying that as if he is a prosecution counsel, isn't he? So don't necessarily believe everything he says.
I would just like to point out for the defense that my buddy Bobby has been an attorney much longer than I have.
Yeah, but he said it nicely.
I know.
This topic reminds me why we gather every Wednesday here and why we do this podcast. It's not therapeutic. It's not about us getting together and talking to each other. It's certainly not illuminating in any way. It's not, there's no information or valuable data in it. The only reason we congregate here is to mercilessly punish whoever has the stupidity to listen to this podcast. Whoever.
So prior to coming, I shared the questions with my family. This is going to be a discussion. And when I asked this, my 9-year-old said, no, water's not wet. I'm wet when I fall in water. And I thought, well, that's actually very logical. And so I originally had the position that Mr. Lewis had when he described his, but after my 9-year-old's brilliant explanation of that he's wet, then I took from that that's the direction I think that river
Now,
went.
I'm interested to know what Eli has to say, because he's a sort of professional in this field.
Oh yeah, I'm close. Water wet.
Not terribly
Water is
helpful.
wet.
Yeah,
But,
so
but
is beer.
succinct.
It's short but succinct. Why do you say it's wet? Remember, I've done thousands of these, so you're not getting away with wet.
Well, water. I'm with waters. Whatever it's touching. You don't find water by itself. So, even when it's just water, it's with itself. So,
It's with itself.
yeah.
So water is kind of defined. Correct me if I'm wrong, and probably I am, but water is famously known to be able to assume all three aggregate states, right? So if it's in a gaseous state, it's obviously not wet, right? If it evaporates. And then, yeah.
I don't know about that one, Ivo. I might push back on that. It would have to almost get to plasma before I would say it's like the fourth state before I would say it's not wet, because steam is wet.
And this is why I really appreciate that Lewis has come over to my side, where water again is not wet until as steam accumulates on something, and then of course.
So it depends on the level of condensation, because so there was a point. I think it was. I might be just again talking out of my ass, but I think I.
Oh no,
it was
never!
in
You would never do that.
It was I think it was in a Kurt Vonnegut book that I've read once, that if you have less than 6 molecules, water molecules, they will not behave like water. It will be. Is that correct?
I don't think
Lewis.
anybody here knows.
Lewis is nodding.
I don't know for
I'm in
sure
shock.
that the number. No, I don't know for sure that the number is 6, but I do know that there's a minimum amount of water that you need in order to have it act like water.
Like water. So wetness is. What is the? Did anybody have time to read the definition of wetness? Is it something that is liquid and you have to be?
It's a very well-known boy band from the UK.
Yeah.
Late 80s, early 90s, called Wet, Wet, Wet.
Okay, that contributes absolutely nothing to the conversation.
So if this boy band is frozen, is it still wet, wet, wet?
Frozen. And there we go. Off we go with the Frozen songs. Please, no. Julian, is water wet? I expect something deep and profound from you.
Well, you're correct. I believe that water is dry, but if you believe that water is wet, while I know you're wrong, I'm not gonna say that.
That's just because you've got a load of fries you want to eat.
It's like it depends on how you define it, and I define water as an object surrounded by water. But if you take a drop of water and put it on another drop of water, one doesn't surround the other. They combine into a bigger drop of water. And is that drop of water wet? No, it's just water. It's like fire. Fire's not on fire, it's fire. You have to, in order for something to be on fire, you got to put the fire around it.
Can I say just farewell to our last listener?
Yes.
After this,
It was awfully nice. Thank you very much for listening. Okay, let's ask Alex. Alex is, I think, an engineer. What do you think, Alex? Is water wet?
Well, I think it's a perception, right? So to name something, if it's wet or dry, it's just a perception, the human perception of the feelings, how you feel when you have water on you, on your skin, or, touching your body. And in the physical sense, I'm not positive that actually wetness is any meaning in the physical sense, in the physics, So I guess I will say it's a perception, like the cold, hot. It's just something that
it's subjective.
Yes, exactly.
Cassidy, if we're having a bath, do we get wet?
Well, technically, okay, so your skin does absorb some water, right? Is that correct? Does your skin absorb the water? Because if it absorbs the water, then you're wet. But I guess technically, Anyway, water is dry.
Water's dry. Okay. Andrei, is water wet?
I don't know, man. I really don't know if I have any opinion at all on this question, but because Eli says that it's wet, water wet.
Wet gang.
Eli's opinion is objective.
All right.
So if a material has low viscosity properties and it flows, then is that makes this material automatically wet.
So this is one of the
It feels wet for sure.
one of the questions that, or one of the articles that I posted with the question was an opinion that if a solid comes into contact with a liquid, then it's wet. The issue is
You mean the liquid is wet?
the solid is wet. So by that argument, water can never be wet because it's not a solid. The problem is, though, then how do you define a liquid? Because technically glass flows, technically sand flows, technically air flows. Like all those things become almost definitionally liquids. So,
Ja Morant, he flows, man.
well, that's true.
This
And-
guy
and don't
is
forget
liquid.
Eminem.
Yeah.
Eminem also
He's
flows.
liquid. Eminem is liquid.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's why he loses himself.
that's it. So,
Fernando, you're last. Come on.
No, I mean we can move on. That was a great question.
No.
I
No.
agree. I agree with
Answer the
Bobby.
question, Fernando.
I don't think. I mean, if you, so let's say. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's a feeling. If I grab like a bucket of water and dump on you now, you're gonna be wet. So is the question is what is wet? What do you say, Eli?
Water wet.
Yeah.
Kathleen.
Yeah, but it's really a question of if you threw a bucket of water on the floor, you wouldn't say, "Wow, that water's wet." You would say, "Wow, that floor is wet."
No, you'd say water wet.
Oh God.
Water wet.
So by common usage, it's the object that has water on it that gets wet, and
Agree.
that's the way we use the language.
Agree.
Yeah.
Therefore,
Well-
water is dry.
Well, you know how people go postal. People go postal, show up at work with a machine gun. It's probably not a good
What?
thing to bring up and joke about, but people do go crazy and go and show up and shoot everybody. I expect after this podcast, next week, Neil deGrasse Tyson will be here with an AR-15 and will shoot our ass. We will all be gone.
So, next question. Thank you for that. When you have a conversation with yourself internally, do you hear your own voice? Do you argue with yourself? Who wins? In my case, it's difficult because I hear my butler's, response, because he doesn't argue with me, so I'm not sure. But it used to be in a communication thing I did once. Show of hands at everyone who talks to themselves.
Everybody talks to themselves.
Everybody does, but there'd always be a lot of people in the class who wouldn't put their hands up, and all those liars. So when you have a conversation with yourself, do you hear your own voice, and do you argue with yourself, and who wins? You prove it, disprove it. Cassidy looks like she's going to throw up if she doesn't get to answer this question, so let's go with Cassidy. Cassidy, what do you think?
Okay, so I do talk to myself, and I do hear my own voice in my head. And then I can just start a conversation with myself in my head while also doing something. Like earlier, I was reading a book, but then I started talking to myself. And I kept reading the book, I was flipping the pages, but I wasn't absorbing anything.
I've
Like,
got
I-
you.
I-
Yeah,
I saw the
exactly what
words.
you're saying.
Yeah.
You're off somewhere else. Okay, so Ivo, what about you? Because you write, you're an international best-selling author in Tonganoxie.
Yeah. So first of all, and we live in a era where everybody can hear their own voice because of YouTube, because of our phones, because of this podcast, because we hear ourselves. talk. But if you remember, Jeremy, way
Well-
back, the first time when you heard your own voice, were you completely surprised?
I was terrified.
I hate it. Most people are very surprised by the way they sound, by the way their voice sounds. It doesn't sound the same when you speak. It sounds very different, and most people hate it. For the longest time, I hated my own voice, and it sounded foreign and weird. That's not the voice I hear inside of my head. When I have a different voice inside my head.
When we're doing broadcasting, they say, don't they? You know that you've got to hear yourself and play it back and make sure that you don't use what's known in the trade as crutches.
Yes.
And so I got to a point where I just didn't tell them I did. They didn't. And
Yeah.
we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of CDs at home of shows which I was supposed to. You're the same.
Yeah.
I don't watch. Lewis.
So I got a question for Ivo. Does that mean, which voice then do you hear? Do you hear the voice that is the voice that you normally hear? Or are you like me and just hear a multitude of voices and don't know which one is really like real?
Do you have voices in your head?
All the time.
Well, before I came out of the mental institution, I had 3 or 7 voices, between 3 and 7 voices. Now it's just one. No, it's kind of a generic voice that I hear in my head. Like my self-awareness voice is kind of generic. I don't even know that I have an accent. Obviously I have an accent, but when I speak English, it's like I pronounce every word perfectly in my head.
Do you speak to yourself? I mean, and Alex as well. Do you speak to yourselves in Bulgarian? Or do you speak to yourself in English?
Yeah, that's a good question, Alex. I'll let you answer. But the big cornerstone for me when I first arrived was when I first started dreaming in English, and it was really interesting because it happened. I remember the first day I woke up. And I realized, oh my God, I had this entire dream in English. And that was kind of a shocker. I didn't know that happens, but I believe now that I switch, without having any control over it, I switch from self-awareness English to self-awareness Bulgarian, and I switch back and forth without even noticing it.
But if you're at home, do you speak to yourself in Bulgarian, do you think?
I eventually start dreaming in Bulgarian when I go back to Bulgaria, and after about 2 weeks I start having dreams in Bulgarian, but now I dream mostly in English.
Alex, when you're watching porn, do you watch Bulgarian or what language do you talk to yourself in?
Well, the thing about immigration is, I believe, it's the age that you immigrate to any country. So if you immigrate in early age, definitely you kind of soak the culture and the language of the country that you immigrate in. Because I came here when I was 24, so it was. I mean, of course, I have a very heavy Eastern European accent that I cannot get rid of it. But with the conversation and obviously living in the country, you start kind of. Speaking, and not only speaking, at the beginning you translate every sentence to your own native language. That's a normal thing. But like Ivo said, after a while it's just kind of fluently transition to a newer language. So I should say that at the stage that I am, and I believe Ivo also, we kind of dream in English too, because that's 90% of the time that we live, we speak and we communicate in this language. So
Kathleen.
that's how it is.
Well, I lived in a different country for quite a long time, but I found weirdly that when I lived in England, I didn't have any trouble with switching from one language to the other. But
which language do they talk over there?
Oh, I forget.
You never
speak British.
accidentally called a wrench a spanner or vice versa while you were there?
Accidentally, yes, sometimes.
Bobby.
But I don't argue with myself ever because I would lose. Okay?
No, because you're always
I am
right.
always right. Therefore, I don't argue with myself. It's just not worth it.
Bobby.
So to piggyback on Ivo and company, for a while I had a fluency in Japanese, and I would often have that discussion in my head about what I was saying in Japanese to double check the quality of the language. And I remember the first time I had my all Japanese dream where the dialogue and myself and everyone involved were speaking Japanese, and woke up in the morning remembering both the content, what was said, and how it went. And it was the most strange experience for me. But to Kathleen's point, I do argue with myself, and I use it sort of to test my arguments for flaws. So if I have to have an argument with someone who I think who has some skill in having good argument structure and being able to see fallacies, and where I'll really have to work, I will test my arguments in my head against myself before I have the conversation with someone else.
Oh, you actually, I just say you're an idiot.
Yeah.
That works.
I get paid by some of these people, so
Fernando.
Well,
do you talk to yourself in
Portuguese?
Portuguese.
You know, weirdly,
Fernando's from Brazil.
Not really, and it's very similar with Ivo's experience. And I also I was even expecting and waiting the day that I would dream and fully in English, and it's so funny how the dictionaries work in our head. Like my weirdest experience was when I was traveling to a place, and back in the day my Spanish was alright, and I need to interact. I was talking, with my ex at the time. It was, in English. There was a lot of Brazilians surrounding us, but the main language on the floor was Spanish. But it's so funny. My dictionaries always get messed up. So sometimes I'm talking to my family, and out of nowhere I talk like a whole phrase in English. You experienced that? How many times I did that with you? Randomly, some language get the primary, a primal feeling to react, and it could be either way. I could be interacting with some, doesn't matter. Could be, in a consulate. Could be, depends where I am. It can flip so weird. So I could talk, I meant to talk in English, but I talk Portuguese. I meant to talk Portuguese. I talk in English.
Andrei, can you speak Portuguese?
No, not really. I mean, every once in a while, I'll hop back on Duolingo for a few months, and I'll learn a few words.
Obrigado.
Tell 5 words.
Does not count.
In Portuguese.
Well, I probably could if I wanted to.
You could.
Yeah.
I bet.
But I don't know. Is it my turn to answer the question?
Yeah,
then?
I'm just wondering.
Okay.
You've lived here most of your life, haven't you? All of your life.
Yeah, all of it.
Yeah, right. So you speak in English. Well, you don't. You speak American because it's not the same.
Yeah.
But so you don't. But your dad. You don't. You're not. But my grandchildren are bilingual.
Yeah.
So I'm just interested to see whether or not. But no. And if you argue with yourself, who wins?
I would hope I win because I'm on both sides, but I've never really argued with myself. Except sometimes I do, what Bobby said. Where if I think I'm gonna have an argument, I would plan it in my head, argue with myself and be like, okay, shouldn't say that, or okay, I should say that. But the voice that I hear in my head, I feel like is my voice. I don't know. But sometimes if I'm talking to someone for a while, then in my head it might be their voice for a little bit, or just sound kind of the same.
Eli, I know water's wet. I got that. Water wet. Do you ever hear your own voice and talk to yourself? Perhaps when you're going up the Amazon
yeah,
or
when
something?
my mind's really humming, it can be like a cacophony of different voices.
Cacophony.
A lot of different, but I consider it all myself, so ain't no thing.
But you don't debate with yourself.
Oh, totally. Self-inquiry, where you take something that you thought you knew and you try to test it a little bit.
Prove it, disprove it.
I do that sometimes. I think it's good, but it's always me, Even when it's a different voice or a different angle, it's just you coming from a different angle.
Who else do I want to ask? Lewis.
I completely back up everything Eli just said. It is, it's always me, because I am the center of my universe. So I can hear
in only the way that you can be.
Exactly. Yeah. I probably mostly hear my parents' voice outside of mine, and it's usually advice that I am weighing one way or the other. I might say, if my dad said this, do I automatically discount it? Or if my mom said this, like, do I give more weight to it? Would I give more weight to it if it was coming from someone other than me? And usually the answer is no, because I'm pretty fucking awesome.
Agreed.
But yeah, I never have any question as to whether or not it is essentially me trying on a different hat for an idea, and just kind of testing the merits of it. So I guess in the long run, I guess that means I do argue with myself. But again, I'm awesome, so I always win.
Julian. First of all, does your father talk to himself?
I'll just say no.
He said no comment.
Right, can you repeat the full question again?
So the question is, do you have conversations with yourself internally? And do you hear your own voice? Do you argue with yourself? And if you do argue with yourself, who wins?
All right, so do I talk to myself? Yes. When I listen to myself internally, it's not like me in a different voice. It's me. Okay, well, sometimes it is, but most of the time it's me, but I have a hat on. That's best explanation I can give. And if me and
that
me with
boy
a hat
has
on,
to have a top hat. It's just come to me. He has to have a top hat.
I want a comically top hat, just saying. But if it's me and me with a hat arguing, then most of the time it's me with a hat, because me with a hat is significantly more logical than I. And so, because I act on impulse most of the time, and sometimes I'll think about it in my head and be logical. I'll be like, is this a good choice to make? Would I regret this decision? Do the consequences outweigh the benefit?
You have never thought that in
You
your
have
life.
literally never thought that.
I think about it a lot,
It was a
just not
brilliant
around
answer.
you.
Yeah.
Just not around you.
Okay.
And Bobby, I have a question, by the way. Did it have subtitles? Your dream, I mean.
No, actually, my dreams
Closed
don't have
caption.
subtitles, but there are some times where the voices don't match the lips.
Your dreams are dubbed.
Yes.
Your dreams are dubbed by actor that usually dubs kung fu movies.
Yeah, dubbed in the native language, 1/2 second behind, and
Yeah.
it's quite hilarious to listen to.
Can you imagine if we didn't have control over our inner voice, what a nightmare it would be? Like, we don't know. Like,
You do?
Your inner voice would be Fran Drashner, and you have no choice. You'd be like, you're late for work, Ivo.
That's not my inner
That
voice.
would
That's
drive you
me.
insane. Or if you have like Barry White inner voice, this makes everything sound sexy. Like, oh yeah, it's time to brush your teeth, Ivo. You know.
So let's move on to a political question, if we can. And the question is this: is it weird that pollsters still have a job? Is it weird that pollsters still have a job? And do we believe that the projected results of the Georgia runoff
Are correct.
are going to be correct? And for myself, clearly actually getting in touch with us, the great general public, is getting very difficult because we don't answer the phone and we don't answer the door and nobody's ever there. So, exit polls notoriously inaccurate. Incorrect, yes. Not accurate.
Yes.
And so some of the youngsters, we have old folk around this podcast and youngsters. And I don't know whether the youngsters simply just don't care about the polling or whether we do. And Kathleen and I used to work for an operation in the UK called Make Votes Count, and where we used to go into schools, high schools, and talk to kids who are in their sort of 17, not quite 18, usually some 18-year-olds there, but 17, and they can vote in England. Can you vote if you're 18 here? Yeah. So we used to do this stuff, the Electoral Reform Society, called Make Votes Count. And it was very, very interesting watching the youngsters, because you would often get maybe 60 youngsters sitting in a school auditorium. And I used to ask a question, by a show of hands, who here would rather be down the pub? And all the hands went straight up, bar about 6. And we'd say to those 6, right, you come on down with us. You've just been elected. You get to make all the rules, because the other ones didn't want to vote. They all wanted to go down the pub.
These are the kind of people you want in government.
Yeah. and we used to come up...
They got to be the government.
They got to be the government. And so we used to come up...
the pub people.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
So in Julian and Cassidy's view, if you are told, if you go wandering into a classroom, you know, there's 60 kids there, right? And I'm just thinking of Cassidy, for example, and you are told that by law you have to hold hands with the people next to you, the guys next to you. That's the law. You've got, and they get all terribly upset about this, worked up. No, they didn't actually say they got cooties, but they didn't want to know.
Yeah.
And we pointed out that's the point. If you don't vote, you don't get to say.
We made certain suggestions over what kind of so-called laws they would pass for the rest of the auditorium, such as you have to hold hands with whoever's next door to you.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that did not make them. That made them think.
But anyway, do we think the pollsters still have a job? And Bobby's got his hand up, and Julian's up. So let's go with Bobby, because he's sewing. No, he's doing needlepoint.
So, and when it comes to pollsters, I think it goes really back to other early quintessential human qualities, such as gambling. And really what a pollster is they are just the marks helping the bookies determine the odds on who the favorite is in any particular race. So, and that's why we call it a political race. It's this, who gets to the end, who gets enough votes. So the pollsters are there to help the bookies figure out exactly who's going to win the race at the end. So that's all it is.
Okay, Julian. Go.
Bobby, I just gotta say, I also love races. But what are those things?
Pollsters?
Yeah.
They're large boxes that sit outside. No, what they do is they predict what's going to happen in a particular election by talking to people, maybe doing phone surveys, standing outside when people are walking outside, or just doing phone surveys. And, so that very generally that's what a pollster.
The question is, am I surprised that they still have jobs?
Yeah.
Yes. Because I don't care who you ask, there's like a 90% chance the opposite thing's going to happen. Let's face it. I think politics are more random than a lava lamp. Like, sometimes they can be okay, but
I'm going to use that.
but like I could not see it happening. So yes, I'm very surprised they still have their jobs.
That's genius. By the way,
I've written that down, and when he does actually run for Senate, in 30 or 40 years' time,
he wins.
I have good luck.
I'm going to make absolutely bloody certain everybody knows that.
One of the guiding principles of this podcast is that we take pride in not preparing for the podcast at all, not reading anything ahead of time. So what is the prediction of the pollsters for the Georgia election?
Right now, they're predicting that Warnock's going to win.
Okay, I see. It's interesting that we are so obsessed with the pollsters, but the truth is, and Kath might testify to this, that a lot of people that get interviewed for those polls are kind of using a little bit of mendacity when answering.
Whoa! What big words?
They're not necessarily
honest. There are
honest.
foreigners here. We don't necessarily know what you mean.
Well, you know what I mean. They're a little bit deceitful in their answers, and not always very honest with the pollsters. I want to point out that Bobby Young, one of our esteemed panelists here, he does look like a grizzled leader of a Lithuanian gangster, like a biker gang. And he's got
not got his leathers on, has he?
He looks like really like a biker gang leader, and he has been needle pointing since we started the podcast and knitting, and it's the most surreal thing to see. It's really stunning. It makes so little sense. It makes less sense even than this podcast.
Well, but the trouble is, Ivo, we're going to have to wait till freaking August to find out what it is he's making. Lewis.
I agree with my esteemed friend Bobby that these guys are essentially like, well, I think it goes a little bit further. I think that they're kind of weighing the outcome. I think that, for instance, we are getting the message that Warnock's going to win for a point. I don't know if that point is to encourage other folks on the liberal side to vote or to encourage more of the conservative folks to come out and vote, but I am not a fan of having the pollsters give a prediction on who's going to win, to basically give odds on what's going to happen. I don't like it. I think that it pollutes the process, and I wish they'd stop.
Just one word for Warnock. He's running against Herschel Walker, who can barely string two sentences together and makes no sense, and he's compromised on so many levels. It almost sounds like a theater of the absurd, his candidacy.
Yep. He was a good player. He was a good NFL player.
He was pretty good, yeah. He was at some point. And
was that in Texas where he lives?
No idea.
but there's so many paradoxes with this guy. His statements make so little sense about our good air migrating to China, and we're getting the Chinese polluted air somehow to move here. Yeah. And it's just he's such a bizarre character. He was the one that was very vociferous about banning abortion, even in cases of rape and incest, and with no exception, and all kinds of penalties for women that have put them straight to prison. And then it comes out that he has paid not for one but for two women to have an abortion. He has driven the woman to the abortion clinic and pushed her to have an abortion. This sounds like a story that's made up by Beckett, or UNESCO, somebody from the representative of theater of the absurd. So Warnock is a freaking priest. He's a fantastic senator, one of the very few people in the United States government who has crossed party lines to work with the other side in times where everything is so polarized. He reached out to freaking Ted Cruz, which, is shocking to me, but Ted Cruz wanted to build an interstate. We don't build anything anymore in the United States. The government doesn't build anything. The government is paralyzed because of polarization. But Ted Cruz wanted an interstate in Texas, connecting East and West Texas. And that's unheard of. We don't build new interstates, completely new from scratch. Mm-hmm. And freaking Raphael Warnock went and extended his hand and helped Ted Cruz pass that piece of legislation. And now they are building this interstate highway. And that's so rare and so admirable. And this is a guy that's universally respected, even on the other side of the aisle, and he got almost beaten by that freak, Herschel Walker, and completely discredited character. I understand he was a good player. He was also horrible for football, by the way, because he was involved in one of the most disastrous trades. You know about the trade that basically created the Dallas dynasty in the 90s. He got traded, Herschel Walker, for a bunch of fantastic players, and they got rid of Herschel Walkers while Dallas got all of these fantastic players and built an entire dynasty where Herschel Walker fizzled and went away. So this guy has the opposite of the Midas touch. Kathleen likes to say Kathleen likes to say Sadim touch, which is Midas spelled backwards, and I agree.
Mentioning let's ask Kathleen. What's your view? Do pollsters still have a job?
Pollsters make their money by making predictions, so you're not going to stop them. Okay, and statistics are generally an accepted form of analyzing stuff, and they're actually pretty good. It takes something unusual to come out completely different from what the pollsters are predicting. And it does happen, but not as often as they're fairly accurate. So we're not going to stop them. Might as well just live with it and try to make sure that they're honest about what they're reporting and not Fox News-ish,
Yeah.
Or CNN-ish.
Oh, okay.
Or MSNBC-ish.
Okay. Quit making adjectives. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Eli.
I'm with old Bob. It's a racket for sure.
But do you believe the results
of the pollsters? I mean, I think it's all just betting, all just money, all just talking, telling people, what they want to hear, or making sure one side is supporting you. And I feel like a lot of who actually gets elected, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that we don't really get to participate in that leads to that election, and that can mean just as much or more than even our civic voice, our civic duty of our vote. So I think it's a real racket for sure, and I think there's money in it for sure, like what you were saying. There's money in it for sure, but take it as you will.
Alex, you've lived in at least 3 different countries that I know about, being Bulgaria, Canada, and now America. What do you think about pollsters?
Well, I mean, there is a history of this. I should say, I don't know if it's a profession or political, political type of job. But there is a whole science called statistics, right? Yeah. So whatever pollsters do, if they do it fairly, can be statistically justified. However, I don't agree to have the pollsters just because I think the average person may, if he's not decided to whom he wants to vote, this will definitely, I think, tarnish the vote, because the average person, kind of, well, let's be fair. The media is very, very big influence of the life of everybody, right? And it's started from Adolf Hitler during the World War II, which used the media for propaganda, they call it, by radio and TV, and it was embraced by all politicians because it worked, right? And it's still working. So when you see the statistic, you will think, oh, am I the dumbest one to vote for a party that will never have a chance to win, or for politicians that will have very slim possibility to win, no matter that his platform or the party platform is actually trying to do something good. So for me, I think it's like in the politics and in the war and in the love, there is no rules, right? So that's why I believe in the perfect world, I don't like to have these posters.
Okay, Cassidy.
Yeah, let me just chime in on this, because this opened up a great point. The polls can really have a demotivating effect on people, because if you see that somebody, according to the polls, is definitely going to lose, it's very likely that you are not going to be motivated to vote and say, I'm not going. So that is an opportunity for massive corruption in this profession. And other than that, I agree with the statistics, and they do calculate standard deviation and distribution and means and all that stuff, but it is also open up for massive
Yes, but you
influence.
can't just refuse to allow anybody to produce statistics on something.
Yeah.
You have to have some trusted names that are open in their methods and that people can believe.
Kellyanne Conway.
Yeah, but that's
To,
not how it's reported. Like we don't actually understand or care to understand the science behind the prediction. We literally, like, you open up the newspaper or hop on the web, and it's all about Warnock expected to win, and that's as deep as it gets.
Well, the media in this country needs some sort of code of honor or enforced by law. That would be nice. It's probably not going to happen.
So let's go back to where I was hoping to go to with Cassidy. I don't know whether
No.
you're... No.
Okay.
That's my answers to the original question.
Do we believe the projected results in Georgia runoff? And you say, no, I don't believe them.
When?
I don't think that was the question she was answering.
Right, okay. Let's ask Fernando. What do you think, Fernando?
Well, I mean, I believe in statistics, and definitely it's a little, it's complex, and of course, when the posters that we hear and people can, just publish crap, like, scientists say, then that's it. So I wish the posters was almost like some auditing, some serious stuff, but at the end, so let's say you have me and you, and we have a whole chicken. I ate the whole chicken, you ate nothing, but we ate, we share 50%. Posters, statistics are very tricky, and when you get too publicized, it can also cause an influence that even divert the real results. It's a tough subject. I think they should remain, but the way media they can misuse some posters and even use unreliable data, calling as a science data, the scientific data. That's all. And hopefully,
Is this the moment where I tell my three-legged chicken story? No.
Yes.
Right. No.
Please do
Okay,
it.
no.
Please do it.
If you don't want to hear it, to hell with you.
Is this story gonna in any way involve Winston Churchill? Because if it is, I'm gonna say no, absolutely
Not unless the
not.
chicken's named Winston Churchill.
Yeah,
Oh, so that's
Winston
right out then.
Winston the chicken. Okay, let's move on. Next question. What time is it? Okay, next question.
Oh. You have one question.
Julian. I'm sorry, Julian. I thought you'd been.
Right. I have something to say.
Oh.
So posters, right? Do they get paid? Do people pay them to what's your prediction? So theoretically speaking, right? Let's say a poster got $25 million because they're trusted or something. The poster, theoretically speaking, rigged the election with $25 million, and then subsequently bet on that election with the money they got previously. So theoretically speaking, they would get more credit because they got the right answer. And if they just kept doing that, I'm not encouraging this, but
I seriously am gonna work to not have you ever get any power.
All right, let's move on then. Parents in Texas have recently found their daughter, who had been kidnapped 51 years ago. The daughter, Melissa Highsmith, described it as a mix of joy and terror. If you discover tomorrow that you were kidnapped as a child and lived your life away from your biological family, how would you react? And I read this story in a number of different places. One of the interesting things for me, I wanted to find out the first thing about the parents that she'd been living with. Were they involved with said kidnapping? The problem for the police is that whilst this is a true story, because they've done it through DNA and everything else, the statute of limitations ran out 20 years after her 18th birthday. And so even if the lady that she has been living with for 50 years, or had when she was a child, even if she did kidnap the child, she's not that she's not liable, apparently. So I don't know. Lewis, what do you think?
As far as the legal stance goes, yeah, I think that the kidnapper is likely out of the clear unless the legislature decides to pass a law in anticipation of her being caught. More salient, though, is like, how screwed up must her self-image be at this point? Like, I'm thinking about me, how much I tie to essentially like my genetics, how much of my personality, my persona, my abilities, I think come directly from my family. Like, all of a sudden to not have that would kind of rock my world. I mean, it wouldn't change the notion that I could do the stuff that I can do, but it literally is a paradigm shift. It would have to be a paradigm shift for me, especially at this age.
So even if the statute of limitations for criminal prosecution has run out, aren't they still liable for civil suit?
Oh, hang on
Really?
a minute. Sorry,
For having
everybody.
ruined somebody's life?
Don't, just a minute, Kathleen. You've got to stop. The lawyers have decided that
First
they're
off,
going
this is
to
not
eat the
legal
popcorn.
advice. I don't practice law in Texas. Texas law would likely apply
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Yada,
You're
yada,
talking
yada.
about us.
Typically, the statute of limitations for a civil suit would be shorter under most circumstances. It would just be a question of when the cause of action accrued. Here, I mean, if she that would be the real question: is when did it accrue? Right? Would it be when she discovered it? I mean, that would be a little bit bizarre. Really, I think that the cause of action would accrue at the time of the kidnapping, and so the statute of limitations. No, you don't think so?
Discovery.
Well, I suppose discovery of the. Do you think that would work under civil law? They're under.
Well, if she was kidnapped,
question.
at say 6 months old, right?
Right.
And it runs out, 20 years after her 18th birthday.
Right.
Okay, so
well,
that's
I mean,
40,
again, are we talking about
38
that's
years?
a criminal suit.
Right.
We're talking about something different.
I mean, ultimately, Bobby's correct. The time of discovery.
Well,
would
we
be
know
the question,
he's
but
correct.
the question
He's
would be
always
discovered
correct,
by
isn't it?
who?
Very boring, really.
Whom?
Yeah, discovery by whom?
That was, by the way, Greg Esquire, which we didn't introduce
Yeah.
because he was a little late. And we have 3 lawyers on the panel today. 3 lawyers walked into a bar.
Oh, God.
Wow.
One
of them.
Ow! That's the joke, isn't it? 3 lawyers walked into a bar.
Greg just pointed out one of them is Jewish, one of them is black, and you can just kind of write your
needle pointing.
Right.
We weren't going to go there. There's no need for this sort of no. Julian, let's hear what Julian's got to say.
Okay, Greg, really quickly, can you say that, but in terms that somebody with an IQ below room temperature would understand?
No.
So really, the question is, when it comes to determining statute of limitations, is you have a certain amount of time. Generally, it's whenever you discover something bad happened. And so in this case, something bad happened was a very, very long time ago. The question is really just going to be whose discovery of it started the cause of action, that time frame running.
Okay.
I appreciate that you were able to explain that to him. I'm going to take credit for it because you tried to explain our law school classes to me. Oh well, see there's that.
All right, but
all right, let's
wait,
pull this all back, and we'll come back to Julian in a second. Or have you finished, Julian?
I'm not finished.
Okay, well that makes sense.
Right. So to answer the actual question, I think that if that happened to me, I would have an identity crisis, and then about 10 minutes later, I'd be like, what's so bad about here of all places? Hear me out, Dad, before you say anything. There's a chance I could have had a better life. There's also probably a little bit of a higher chance I could have had a worse life. So as long as I'm good, I'm all fine with this. I've grown up in a lovely place, so no complaints.
Okay, let's move on. Well, Fernando, what do you think? How would you feel if you found out you'd been kidnapped 51 years ago?
It's I don't know. That can be that's a complicated question, and actually, because that happened with me. No. Next question.
Lewis.
I kind of gave my answer in response earlier. Like, I think it would be earth-shattering, paradigm-shifting. It would take me a while to like come to terms with the fact that like everything that a lot of the things that I have based my self-image on are false.
Alex, when you were kidnapped from France as a baby and taken to Bulgaria, from Canada.
Well, I believe if I should compare like this kidnapping to adoption, let's say, for example, everybody knows that Steve Jobs was adopted, and he, in later of his life, he found out that his father was actually, his biological father was actually a restaurant holder in somewhere in Palo Alto, but he did not want to get in touch with him because he claimed that actually the people who raise him are his parents. So in this case, although of course biological mother and father of this lady and she was kidnapped, so it's a little bit different, but she was raised by whatever person kidnapped her. So, and I guess she was raised right? I mean, she was raised normally. So it's very mixed feeling for me. But at the end of the day, from what I read, she found that she has a sister, biological sister, and they got together, and it was a lot of emotions. But if you are a grown-up adult and your life is, connected to the people who raise you, at the end of the day, that's the people who you appreciate and who you feel like it's your parents, because at the end of the day, they raise you, they give you education, they, kind of teach you the basics of life. So they care about you. So my bottom line is, although it's not right what this lady did with kidnapping this girl, at the end of the day, she didn't sell this girl for organs or do something bad to the girl, but she raised the girl as her daughter. So, I mean, I don't approve that, but at the end of the day, that's the fact.
Bobby.
She kidnapped her from somebody called Jeffrey Dahmer, I think was...
I think they did a good job. I'm just saying.
So, what was the statute of limitations, Lou? You said
20
for
years.
20 years. So I have 2 boys and a daughter for 3 more years.
Mm-hmm.
The others
and
are
you're home
okay.
free.
Yeah,
Those are
you'll be
okay.
fine.
So I got it. Yeah.
Bobby.
Okay.
So when I first read the story, my first original thought was that, man, that really sucks. And then when I read tonight's question, my thought was, well, if the family that I was kidnapped from was much better off than the family that kidnapped me, then maybe I'll be super happy. But ultimately, like psychologically, joking aside, I think that would be very, very difficult to think about all the times where, you had those arguments and your kid looked you in the face and said, you're not my mom and you can't tell me what to do, or any of that other stuff. You're not in charge of me. And the mom who, having the opportunity to say, you're right. Mm-hmm. You're right. You can get the hell out. Those opportunities that the kidnapping mom had and didn't take, it would make me think that maybe there's a quality of parenting there that might have existed that we can't underestimate.
Who's next? Kathleen.
I have a huge problem with the idea that if you kidnap a child and take it away from its family, and if you keep it long enough, there's not going to be any consequences. I think that's a sucky thing to have happen.
Okay, Eli.
I think at first I would feel really betrayed that the people that I love had been lying to me for so long, and I know that I'd want to meet, my birth parents, the people who actually gave birth to me, but would they become, like my actual parents? I don't know. I really agree with you, homeboy, in that your parents are the people who raise you and put the time and care and love into you that you need to become the person you are today.
Cassidy. Cassidy.
Okay,
Thank you.
so first of all, I find it really hilarious that my mom and my dad would kidnap me and then my dad would leave. So that's kind of goofy of him. Anyway, but I currently like my life. So I mean, if it was a better family, I would be, I don't know. Anyway, so I feel like that I couldn't understand. I couldn't comprehend that my whole life I've been kidnapped. But would I met my amazing friends, not including Julian, today, if I wasn't kidnapped? I mean,
Julian, you want to come back?
Yeah, I need to reiterate. So basically, if my dad decided, this is a nice baby, I'm gonna take this one, right? Like, like, why would I argue? Like, if my dad was a mean guy, like not a good father, I would be like, yeah, that sucks. But he's not. So
you're saying it's okay to kidnap somebody if you're nice to them?
No, I'm saying that if...
That doesn't make any sense.
I'm not saying that. You're gaslighting.
that's like gatekeep girl boss.
But if I personally was kidnapped, like, I don't, like... there's a possibility that things could have gone worse. So why would I feel bad about that? And, like... what's the big deal? I'm not like it might be because I'm young, but I don't have that much like.
Well, there is a big difference between how old you are,
and how old you are by like 2,000 years. I know.
Yeah, but literally 2,000 years. But
what about your parents that you got kidnapped from? They lost a baby. They lost a child.
What if they don't want a child? What if they were gonna
she's been looking for her for 50 years.
These folks have continued to look for this girl. Like, they've given her birthday parties.
They have had irreparable harm done to them.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah.
But we're going off of if I got kidnapped, and I'm saying that if I got kidnapped, it might have been because of neglect. Maybe my dad was like, dang, these parents are being so mean to this kid. I'm going to just take it.
Yeah, the child was just taken out of a bassinet or something.
Yeah, I know. I'm not talking about that child. I'm talking about me.
All right. So, look, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm not finished.
Yeah.
But I am. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to another Wednesday Night Undressed, but we do have some sponsors.
I don't know. I mean, I've heard that recently I have really important news. Apparently, our marketing department and the HR department have merged.
Was it a one-night stand or what?
Well, good question. But apparently this doesn't matter because according to math, 0 plus 0 equals 0.
But is it wet?
I don't know. I mean, we got to ask our inner voice. Susan, she did send us some copy. Of course, we are financially, as you know, very, very limited. Our marketing department doesn't even operate an answering machine anymore.
Oh, dear.
We used to have a reel-to-reel magnetophone. That doesn't work anymore. We used pigeons. We used pigeons to submit the copy. And apparently today we have nothing left. She used some kind of a wax-covered cylinder.
She ate one of those.
to record the message. But let me see what she sent me here. Let's see. Oh, wow. Wow, you guys, come on. This is exciting. This is actually exciting. Believe it or not, guys, we are sponsored today by no other than an American institution. Black Friday is sponsoring us today. Black Friday itself is sponsoring us. So let me wind up the wax-covered cylinder and see what... actually, the actual Black Friday has recorded this message. So I'm kind of curious to see what Black Friday's creepy voice sounds like. Let's see. Hello there, you putrid douche nozzles.
It's me, Black Friday. Yeah, that's right. Ivo is correct. I am an American institution. A mental institution, but institution nevertheless. What are you? What do you say, Jeremy? You're a podcast? Police! Wednesday night undressed is to podcasting what Chris Christie is to rhythmic gymnastics. You are a stool-sniffling disgrace is what you are. Losers! I'm only sponsoring you because I've already endorsed everything else. That's right! There's nothing left! Black Friday hit everything this holiday season. You're the last unsponsored entity in the world. I am mighty! I'm the greatest holiday in the observable universe.
Okay.
Thanksgiving Thursday is my bitch. People can hardly wait for it to be over so they can embrace me. I provided escape velocity for millions of poor souls who are trying to get away from their relatives. Giving thanks. Thank you, Uncle Elijah Snowflake. Thank you, Grandma Annabelle Safe Space. Fuck you, Putfutzers. Turkish Murky. How about Best Buy at 2 a.m, motherfuckers? I'm the best holiday ever. I am more patriotic than that firecracking wimp 4th of July. I'll put a red light and blue Roman candle up that old fart's ass. You know where 4th of July should be? In a retirement community. It's time we put some depends on Independence Day. I, Black Friday, stand for everything that is American, buying shit and violence. When else can you fist fight 6 Karens for a flat screen TV? You want some fuzzy holiday memories, don't you? How about the sweet memory of crotch punting a 50-year-old certified public accountant over a Tickle Me Elmo? Fireworks ain't entertainment. Entertainment is tackling from behind a grizzled survivalist at a Nebraska Furniture Mart and then stabbing the fucker with your car keys so you can have first dibs at a washing machine. Kathleen says she doesn't like me. Why, Kathleen? Why? Is it because I'm black? And Jeremy Taylor, you limey Grizzo Grazzo, you didn't buy one single thing last Friday. Not one thing? What were you doing? Were you watching Downton Abbey? Of course you were. I see. So interesting. Were the beloved Crawleys and their intrepid butlers preparing for royal visit from the King and Queen of England? I know. Scandal, romance, and intrigue ensued, leaving the future of Downton hanging in the balance. Jeremy Taylor! You are an American now! You odoriferous colonial ass goblin!
This is a very foul mouth.
I'm going to have my butler speak to you.
That's it. Your green card has been revoked. You don't like Black Friday? Then go back to Wallace and Gromit and eat some overcooked spotted dick. Real Americans know exactly what Black Friday means to our great nation. Mm-hmm. True patriots know perfectly well that they need the stuff they don't need. And Black Friday is here to deliver. How about a 20% off of a 500% overpriced Dyson vacuum cleaner with cyclonic separation technology? Or better yet, get an 85-inch flat screen TV to replace your 84-inch flat screen TV. Why are you still here at Murph's? I got deals for you, you rancid wackadoodles. I got Cabbage Patch dolls, and Wii gaming system, and iPhones, and turbo toasters, and transparent air fryers, and diapers for Jack Russell Terriers, and pooper scooper for your grandpa, and random stuff made out of plastic. Lots and lots and lots of delicious plastic. I have it all. It's all there waiting for you, but you disappoint me, you rotting podcasting ejectamenta. You'd rather yap about wet water than perform your patriotic duty and shop. Is my inner voice agreeable? I'll tell you what your inner voice is. Your inner voice is communist. And I will arrest him and send him to commie prison, along with your illegitimate inner child.
Oh, God.
I'm disappointed in you, and I'm disappointed in my son. Giving Tuesday. Seriously, Giving fucking Tuesday. I raised a snowflake. Why are you giving, son? I don't recognize you since you started dating Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That bitch ruined you, GT. We don't give in America, we take. Remember that, Tews?
Tews, good old Tews.
Look at your brother, Cyber Monday. Now that's a good lad. That boy's so young and yet so crafty. He's been shagging that Amazon bitch. And even had a threesome with her and Alibaba. What a stud. He's been taking money and stealing identities from people since he was born. Tax-free! Anyway, you need to redeem yourselves, assholes. Go to the mall or Target or Kohl's or even Woe fucking Mart. They have almost everything you don't need. And you should buy it immediately. Otherwise, from next week, you will be ambushed. You will surrender to me. And Wednesday night undressed will become Black Friday Ross dressed for less.
Thank you to our sponsors again. Well, you've been listening to another Wednesday Night Undress, and all that remains is for me, Jeremy Taylor, to say thanks for listening. And we particularly want to thank our team tonight, Bobby, Kathleen, Julian in particular, Cassidy.
Bye.
Fernando, Ivo, Lewis, Andrei, Alex, and Eli.
And Susan.
And Susan, yes. Because she's come back and she's performing, isn't she now?
Yeah, she got Black Friday to endorse us.
She did, and that was very clever of her. I want to thank all our friends in Bulgaria, Australia, France, Germany, Holland, England, Canada, where else? Tonganoxie.
Yes.
I think Tonganoxie is quite important, don't you?
Yeah, they've got wet water.
They have got wet water, yes. So again, you've been listening to another Wednesday Night Undress.
Yay!